Hi, everyone. Robert Hefner here, coming to you during spring break from Oklahoma City, where it's about 35 degrees outside. Since the weather's so bad, it actually has given me a lot of time to aggregate and digest some data that I've been meaning to for quite a while, trying to answer one particular question. And that question is this: are mandates effective? In particular, are renewable portfolio standard mandates effective at helping economies to decarbonize? The data sets I will be playing with today come from the Energy Information Agency, the EIA, as well as the National Conference of State Legislatures that have done an excellent job of capturing the various RPS and RES targets by state. For those of you not familiar with those terms, RPS stands for Renewable Portfolio Standard. These are mandates. And RES stands for Renewable Energy Standard. These are not mandates. So an RPS is a mandate whereby a RES is not. All right, let's dive into our first dashboard. So the first dashboard I've got up here for you shows a map of all the different states that have set either a RPS or an RES standard and target. As far as colors are concerned, red is bad, meaning that those states have not done a good job of achieving their stated goals, and green states are good. It's quite stark on the map. We'll talk about that in a second. Over here on the right side, you'll notice some numbers and some gauges. Let me explain those briefly to you. First and foremost, since all states are selected, or rather no specific state is selected, both types, RES and RPS, are showing, and these numbers are all averages. So the average target date of an RPS or an RES across all states is 2023. This number is not a target. This actually just is a demonstration of how expensive the electricity currently is. An average price per megawatt hour. Those are in dollars. So this is across all states. We have an average $11.15 per megawatt hour electricity cost. That's across all sectors from industrial to retail, which is what the consumer would pay at their home. We have two gauges here. These are basically the same gauge with one difference. The top gauge, which is the gauge I tend to focus on, shows the percentage of wind and solar to a particular stated target. The bottom one is all renewables. All renewables include things like biomass, wood, geothermal, and other. But the reason that I tend to focus on this top gauge is because when we're talking about any kind of a mandate or any kind of a stated goal, what we're really talking about is wind and solar. The other renewables are largely maxed out across the United States. Maybe that's not exactly fair to things like geothermal, but they're just so small in terms of scale that they're somewhat negligible, other than hydroelectric, which has largely been built out. So anyway, wind and solar is where I tend to focus when we're talking about renewable portfolio standards. And then at the bottom, you can see the net generation. This is in gigawatt hours. And so this amount of gigawatt hours, which is 2.6 million gigawatt hours, is across all of these states that are on the map and filled in. 28.34, this is the target percentage across all states. And then this is the current amount of renewables, or rather on this one, it's the current amount of wind and solar to that target, the bottom one being the current amount of all renewables to that particular target. Okay, now that you understand this dashboard, let's start diving in. We'll start with states that you might think of first when it comes to renewables. So let's start with New York. It's a red state on the map. Obviously, you can tell it's not doing too well with regard to its stated target of 70% renewables by 2030. This is a quite aggressive goal by 2030. And as you can see, New York has very little renewables to speak of whatsoever. They are a large energy consumption state, large generation state, 134,000 gigawatt hours in 2019. And their cost per megawatt hour is actually quite high at $12.49 a megawatt hour. So New York's an RPS state. It has mandated this, and we'll see whether or not they get to that stated goal. The other state you might be thinking of is California. Let's go take a look at California. So their first target is 2024. They're targeting 44% wind by that point in time. And as of current, they're at 32% among all renewables, but only 20%, so less than halfway there when it comes to wind and solar. Their cost is even higher for electricity than that of New York City or New York as a state. They're at $14.64 a megawatt hour. To give you an idea of how high that is, Germany and Denmark among the world are the leaders in the most expensive cost per megawatt hour. Germany and Denmark are both above $30 a megawatt hour. So even in the United States, even though this is high here, it might be the highest other than Hawaii. It's still, still half of what Germany and Denmark are at the moment. All right, so there's California, and California is a renewable energy, maybe a green leader, as most would refer to them. So let's foil these two states, New York and California, to the progressive state, Oklahoma. This might be a weird word for some of you to potentially hear when referring to Oklahoma. We actually put forth a renewable energy standard in 2010 called the Oklahoma First Energy Plan. It was put together by a Stanford graduate who was our Secretary of Energy at the time, named Michael Ming. He's both a friend and a mentor, but I'm getting a little distracted. Let's get back to the data here. Of note, we blew past our 15% goal by 2015. In 2015, I think we were above 20% renewables in our electricity stack. And notice today we're at 34% out of 34%. So almost all of our renewables come from wind in particular. Meanwhile, our cost per megawatt hour is extremely low. Basically half that of California at $7.59 a megawatt hour. We are an RES state. So Oklahoma has done very well without any kind of mandates whatsoever. Our generation is higher than I actually anticipated. We're at 83,000 gigawatt hours, and to foil that back to New York, they're at 134,000. So Oklahoma is an energy-intensive state. Meanwhile, we're still at 34% of our electricity stack being from wind. I will note, even though the numbers are not official and they're not out yet, I believe in 2020, Oklahoma achieved over 50% of electricity consumption from wind. So Oklahoma's quite progressive by comparison to California and New York. Again, something you might not be potentially used to when referring to Oklahoma. One other state I think I'll point out for you is West Virginia. This one should have an asterisk next to it because in 2009, I believe it was, West Virginia actually set an RPS, a mandate to be at 15% renewables by 2020. They ended up scrapping that plan and canceling it or revoking it through their legislature in 2015. As you can see, they have not done a particularly good job of moving. They're still at 2% of their electricity stack coming from renewables at a cost of $8.71 per megawatt hour. So there you have it. There's some states for us to look at. Let's look at states real quick, though, whereby the target date has already passed. So give me a moment. And why am I not able to? There we go. All right. We're going to go filter to 2015, 2017, 2019, 2020, and 2021. All right. So what you're seeing on the map now is all the states that their target date has passed. And the states in red, again, are states that did not achieve those goals. States in green are ones that did. What is interesting to notice here is the states with a RPS were all red. None of them achieved their goals. You can go look at Michigan. Michigan, 5%, 6% out of their 15% stated goal. Wisconsin, same story, 4% out of their 10% stated goal. And both of these states have very high electricity costs. $11.80 in Wisconsin, $11.28 in Michigan. Pennsylvania, even worse. They might be the worst of all. They said they mandated that you had to get to 18% renewables by 2020. They got nowhere close. The home state of Bernie Sanders here is Vermont. They did a lot better than the other states. It says 47% renewables, 28% from wind and solar out of their 55% target by 2017. Those numbers, by the way, are 2019 numbers. So either way, Vermont is not exactly an energy intensive state. 2,400 gigawatt hours of generation in 2019, again, to foil that to Oklahoma. So keep some of these percentages in mind when referring to scale. But either way, extremely expensive electricity at the same time. Going to the green states, North Dakota blew past their goal. South Dakota blew past their goal. Kansas blew past their goal. Oklahoma, same thing, blew past their goal. So what you're seeing here are that renewable energy standard states are dramatically outperforming renewable portfolio states, at least among states where the target date is already passed. Let's go back then and do the same analysis and look at all dates into the future. So RPS states, they're 14% renewables, 9% wind and solar to their 32% target. They're nowhere close. Their average target date is 2024, and their average cost per megawatt hour is $11.50. Foil that against RES states. RES states are much better in terms of their cost for electricity, and they've blown past. They're nearly twice what the amount of renewables, and particularly wind and solar, than RPS states. So 9% wind and solar RPS, 20% wind and solar RES. So what you're seeing here is a little bit of a definitive answer. Frankly, I didn't expect to see the data be so decisive. Let's go to dashboard 2. I want to share a couple things with you on this dashboard. Let's go back to some of the states we've looked at. West Virginia, oh goodness, they're still over 90% coal in their electricity stack as of 2019. It's no wonder why they scrapped their renewable energy goals in 2015, I think. The other one that we talked about, I guess, New York. Let's go look at New York. You'll notice the virtue signaling state that banned fracking still has a very nice natural gas component in its mix. They're still 38% natural gas, and they certainly don't have much to be proud of in terms of renewables in their mix either. Let's see here. They're only 3.74% wind, and their solar doesn't even register. So maybe Governor Cuomo can try and cover these facts up as well. He seems to be good at that lately. Moving over to California, you see a similar story with natural gas, 46% of California's energy mix. They're better in terms of renewables. They're at 14% utility scale PV and 8% wind. Again, expensive electricity out there, but it just so happens that their cost of electricity is nearly twice that of Oklahoma, with nearly half the amount of wind and solar and renewables. So Oklahoma has nearly twice the amount of renewables in its energy mix to California. Meanwhile, it's half the cost for its electricity. That's remarkable. I'll give an honorable mention to Texas real quick for the Texans listening. The reason Texas wasn't on our previous dashboard is because Texas, although they did institute a RPS, a mandate, they did so not as a percentage. They did so as a actual megawatt goal, by which they've actually blown by. And what this originated from, they might have been the first state with an RPS. I don't know. California might have done it before them, but the way it originated was then CEO of Enron, Kenny Lay, had actually lobbied then Governor George Bush to institute a renewable portfolio standard in Texas, and he did. So those of you that are thinking this might be a partisan thing, think again. And that 10,000 megawatt goal was by 2025 in Texas. They blew past that. So let's look real quick at installed wind capacity by year. And I've chosen to include California, which is a state most people think of when it comes to wind and solar, Oklahoma and Texas. And as you can see, since 1999, Texas has dramatically risen to be the number one state in terms of wind installed capacity. They're now over 30 gigawatts of installed wind. And surprisingly, Oklahoma has surpassed California as well. So back to the energy mix by state. I want to do one thing real quick. I want to foil Texas to Oklahoma. And I want to do this because, as you guys remember, last month we had this deep freeze that came through the Midwest, and ERCOT had all kinds of outages and blackouts for days that caused a lot of problems. If you're interested in that, I actually already wrote a op-ed that was published by the Oklahoman. To my surprise, it actually got published in Newsmax as well, and a couple other national outlets. I'll have that link in the show notes for you. Should you be so interested? But I want to briefly foil Oklahoma to Texas. First and foremost, first point I want to make: Oklahoma is a regulated state with its electricity market. We are part of what's called the Southwest Power Pool, which is a 14-state regulatory system, whereby Texas is completely unregulated, deregulated. Second thing I want to foil is Oklahoma has a higher renewables mix than Texas, without the benefit of nuclear, which in Texas is 8.65% of their electricity stack. We have none in Oklahoma, and significantly less coal. Oklahoma has 9.4% coal versus Texas is nearly 20%. So we have a higher renewables mix. We're at 34% to Texas's 17%. And if you look at current numbers, which appear to be, we might have gone over 50% for 2020. Meanwhile, even among all that, even though Oklahoma is regulated, even though we have a higher renewables stack, even though we don't have the benefit of extremely inexpensive and safe nuclear power, our cost per megawatt hour is still less than Texas. I find that interesting. I wanted to point it out. I don't really know what to make of that yet. So in conclusion, though, well, not yet in conclusion, a couple notes. As I was producing this video, the Wall Street Journal came out reporting that the Biden administration is planning to use a backdoor to bypass Congress in order to enact a Green New Deal mandate upon all states. They're doing this through what's called the NAAQS, the Ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standards. CNN tweeted, and I'm going to read this to you. Representative AOC tells me she will be using the 3-week recess members have from voting in Congress in part to prepare the Green New Deal for rollout, working to get new sponsors and coalition partners on the progressive environmental policy. This is interesting to me. I'm going to come back. Hey, this is interesting to me for two reasons. Number one, this is interesting because they currently control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Why are you having to use a regulatory backdoor when you control those three branches of government? Number two, fact that I find interesting, as you've seen today, mandates don't seem to be very effective when it comes to actually getting states to decarbonize. It's very clear, which frankly I didn't expect to see, but it's very clear that renewable energy standard states have dramatically outperformed renewable portfolio standard states when it comes to not only their cost per megawatt hour, which matters to people, and it particularly matters to people that are not high income earners. Sure, Bill Gates can go out and pay the green premium, as he calls it in his book, which is a wonderful book, by the way, to go out and pay for jet fuel that's 2-3x that of normal jet fuel so that he's net zero jet fuel. Great. That's great when you're rich, but when you're not, these things really matter. I'm getting off target here a little bit, but mandates just don't appear to be that effective. And the fact remains, the United States is the only and first country to achieve its Paris climate goals, a decade ahead of schedule, mind you. So to conclude, if you've enjoyed this content, and even if you didn't, I hope you engage with me. Please follow me on YouTube. Please head to www.Hefner.Energy and check out all of the resources that I'm putting out for you on a weekly and even semi-monthly basis, videos, articles, and otherwise. That's all I've got for you this week. Appreciate it. Have a good one. See you next time.